What the is leadership? Thought-provoking conversations with expert leadership scholars, exceptional leadership practitioners, and other extraordinary individuals. Good day. I'm Jonathan Kroll, and I am so excited for this particular conversation with Gary Redfeather. He is a faculty member and the director of the Medical Leadership Education and Research Program at De Montfort University. He's also been incredibly involved in pharmacy leadership programs. He's a trained pharmacist, and he is an endurance athlete. So, Gary, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you, Jonathan. Thanks for having me in.
Totally. And I should also share that you are a board member for the sponsoring organization of the Leadership Trainer Certification Program. And this conversation is actually a continuation from conversations we've been having over many years on many continents in many countries: Nicaragua, United States, England. We walked Hadrian's Wall in the north of England a couple years ago. It was supposed to be a 5-day walk. We did it in 3. I still think I have blisters 2 years later.
Well, I'm super happy to be here, and as you can tell, yes, I'm in the UK, right? So De Montfort University is in Leicester, England. It's in the East Midlands of England, which is funny because it's like the Midwest here. So I kind of feel at home, having been raised in Wyoming. So yes, Jonathan, super excited to be here to talk about leadership and our thoughts. So thanks for having me in.
Totally. And we start this conversation as we always do. What the leadership?
And that's a good question. And I like the way that it's framed because I scratch my head daily and go, what the is leadership? And then fill it in. So to put a little bit of spin on my background, so thanks for introducing me. I've been intensely interested in the mind and how it works. And so I got into leadership and leader development as a young pharmacist, looking at how our education didn't focus at all on what leadership was. And that's because we really didn't care as a healthcare industry, or we thought we knew. And so what the fuck is leadership was the perfect question to be asking, because we weren't really addressing the answer. So my life has been an exploration of about 30 plus years now, exploring the answer. And I can tell you, I don't know yet, and I'm getting smarter. So to unpack that, to answer the question, I think to me is to kind of get into the realm of the unanswerable. So we're sitting at a paradox, which is a very similar world where I've sat in pain management, resiliency training, and differentiating the nuanced differences between, say, pain and suffering, because we know there's a difference between pain and suffering. And so I found a series of descriptions by a woman named Elaine Scarry, and she wrote a book called The Body in Pain. And it's a very interesting book because it talks about human torture, right? And the power of torture. And so why might I be bringing up torture and leadership?
Yes.
Well, there's actually a lot of parallels between leadership and pain. And I would actually say a third thing called love. So I wanted to read you something, and I want you to see if these may be appropriate for leadership, love, and pain. So this is what Elaine says about pain. There's 3 different parts to it. So the first thing is there is no language for pain. That would be pain, more than any phenomenon, resists verbal objectification. So we cannot put in objective words pain. Okay, now here's the second part. Pain enters into our midst as at once something that cannot be denied and something that cannot be confirmed. So it's an absolute paradox. It's something that cannot be denied and that cannot be confirmed. And then the last part is to have pain is to have certainty. To hear about it is to have doubt. Okay?
Oh, fascinating.
So this is all about the unreachable, undefinable nature of pain. But yet We can't not know what pain is.
Yeah.
Unless we're born with congenital insensitivity to pain, which some people are, which kills you before you're like in your teens, we all know what pain is. But yet
Sure.
to hear about somebody else's pain, we go, I can't, I don't know what that is. Okay?
Yeah.
So if you replace love, for every place you've heard pain in here, there is no language for love. It resists verbal objectification, right? It enters into our midst as something that cannot be denied and something that cannot be confirmed. Isn't that love? And then to be in love is to have certainty. To hear about somebody else's love is to have doubt. Well, this is true of leadership as well.
Definitely.
There is no language that really captures leadership. However, we try to do that so that we can explore it, so that we can research it, so that we can start to define, are there better types of leadership? Are there more appropriate styles of leadership?
Yeah.
And are there better ways of leading that lead to a collective good versus an individual gain? And so, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm really drawn to this notion in particular because as you're describing pain from the text and sort of leading into how there's parallels between pain and love and leadership, with regard to leadership, we all know what it is. We see it and practice it in our daily lives every single day. And this includes the extraordinary, the exceptional leadership, and the really damaging, the destructive leadership.
Yes, and that's absolutely the key thing. So pain, just to draw back on the pain is the most important sensory phenomenon that keeps us alive. We can get rid of sight, we can get rid of sound, we can get rid of taste. It's really pain that is the most important sensory phenomenon. Pain is so important, it overrules every other system in the body to make sure that pain, is the one in charge.
Uh-huh.
Does it sound like a leader? A leader usually thinks, and this is where we get into the agnostic nature, which I'd love to talk about leadership, is we get into the realms of systems only operate in the ways we ask them to operate. They're really agnostic to the quality
Yes.
of what we're asking it to do. So we can train the brain, which I do and I help people do, to be more beneficial when trauma happens versus going down into a post-traumatic stress disorder. Because everyone has heard of PTSD, but the vast majority of people have never heard of PTGO, which is post-traumatic growth order.
Uh-huh.
Instead of being stress disorder, you go into a growth order that's you're better because of pain. And it's like, because that's the way the system is trained. But leadership is agnostic as well. So the way I would define leadership is really just two words. It's facilitated growth.
Okay.
Period. So it's facilitated because the leader or the system or whatever it is that is part of the system makes change easier. Because without leadership, we go to a default future. The system operates the way it does in this present moment because everything was designed to bring us right here and right now. And if we did nothing at all different, we would go to a default future. It's absolutely 100% set. Variability, whatever, But so leadership is really facilitated change. So it's making something away from that default future.
Yeah.
Growth, because we think of growth and we think of leadership as only positive. And that's clearly not true. That's clearly not true, I think, as the world politics, political situations are starting to show. But this is something that's not new either. This is something we've known about. And so facilitated growth sounds positive. It really does. However, cancer is a facilitated growth.
Yeah, so talk more about that.
What's that? Yeah, so cancer is just normal cells accumulating different abilities that overwhelm the system. And so cancer is an absolutely natural phenomenon about how the system works, but something happens that facilitates change in a way that it grows. Now, I think most of us would agree that cancer is not necessarily a beneficial thing. Leadership is facilitated growth that can be taken in a cancerous
Mm-hmm.
direction, or just like regular growth, it can transform us in more positive ways. The same elements, the same ontological phenomenon that come into facilitated growth of cancer kind of come into play with leadership as a cancer of an organization. The same types of phenomena that take it in a positive direction can actually be seen and cultivated to take the system into a positive direction, if that makes sense.
So the question that I have for you as an educator and a leader in your own right is, assuming we want to go in a positive direction with our facilitated growth, how do we do that?
Yeah. So what we have to do is we have to take, and this is where the resisting verbal objectification comes into play, is we have to, as well as we can, objectively, kindly, compassionately, openly, in the most vulnerable state, assess how we got here. Because leadership is taking us from here. We can't change the past, so stop worrying about that, but understand it, unpack it to get to here so that we can really understand the fundamental changes that need to happen that take us more in this direction and not in that direction.
Yeah.
And so we've looked at leadership, and you and I have had these conversations a lot, and it's in our programs that we do with Lead Air. There are very fundamental, what I call ontological, which is the essence, the study of the essence of something, phenomenon around leadership. Okay, so we know things like vision is absolutely paramount. Okay, so if we look at vision, just to unpack one tiny bit, leaders have a vision of a different future that most people don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a path on how to get there.
And a path on how to get there, right? So it's not just vision. You can when we visualize something, it's not just seeing it, it's actually hearing things, it's understanding of the past. Well, when you see things that other people don't, or you hear things that other people don't, you're called a schizophrenic. Right? So what differentiates a leader, true visionary, from a schizophrenic? You know, somebody who is disassociated from reality. You go, not much. That's what is up with leadership, is because one person's visions that lead to a better way is one other person's visions that kind of go in a different direction. We go, not quite leadership, but it's very closely related. And just because a leader has vision and a path to get to a place doesn't necessarily mean it's for the good of the collective. And so if we look at some leaders in years past, Pol Pot, Hitler, others, people would go, did Hitler, just to use an example, did he have vision? Very much so. Did he have a process to get him and his people to his idea of the future? The answer is, yeah.
Sure.
Most of us would go, I don't think that was really the best vision for kind of the world collective. We can actually research this stuff. And so there's a whole beautiful field of almost neuropsychology, behavioral psychology. It's really behavioral neurobiology.
Yeah.
That's to say, are there better ways of operating as a leader, as a system and part of a system that actually help the vast majority of people out? And the answer is, yeah, we're starting to investigate this and we're starting to see this. So my program starts to unpack those various levels to say, okay, in medicine, what is medical leadership? And I agree with you. Any person who is in the medical field, doesn't matter if you're a consultant over here, which is the top doctor, or a junior doctor, or a nurse, or a pharmacist, if you're involved in the system, you're a leader. There's positional leadership, and then there's influential leadership. There's all kinds of mixtures. And so what is leadership is something that you go, what is it not? Because if leadership is facilitated growth and influence, vision, tenacity, or resilience, has to have other people following.
Yeah.
There's not one thing that is happening around us that isn't really leadership. And that's the point, is every single one of us is involved, and every single one of us can make ourselves better as leaders and followers.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Well, that's really interesting. So, in a practical sense, how do you train or teach or engage in dialogue your students around leadership?
so yeah, so very similar to experiencing love, right? You can read about it, you can see pictures, you can experience it in two-dimensional, whatever video format you want to, but until you've really lived it, you don't really understand it. And so there's a phrase that I start my program off. It's simply saying leadership cannot be taught. Full stop. It must be learned. Okay? Now, just like anyone who has picked up golf on their own knows, you can learn how to golf well, or you can learn how to golf really badly. I'm in this camp. So just because we train ourselves doesn't mean we're training ourselves well. We absolutely, as Aristotle said, we're creatures of habit. Not all habits lead us to where we want to go.
Exactly.
So yeah, so the way that we approach leadership in my program, and as we know in Lead Air, is we paint a safe place so that the women and men who come in can really just sit and go, I don't really understand me. I don't understand how it got here. I understand, though, that there were things that helped me along the way and things that didn't necessarily help me along the way. And that's where we go, fantastic. Can you sit with that? Can you just simply sit with yourself and be okay with where you are?
Yeah.
Because if you can't, you'll never progress forward.
Yeah.
You'll never go forward.
What I so appreciate about what you're sharing now, and you shared a little bit ago, is I think a forgotten piece of leadership or leader development, which is the reflective process. That we often think about leadership as very physical and engaged and practice oriented. There's action to it, and there is.
Yeah.
But if we don't start with understanding and assessing and getting in tune with who we are and our leadership story and our leadership journey and where we want to go, then the practice is not going to be as impactful as we want it to be.
And oftentimes what we're trained to do, it goes against what develops into a resiliency. And so just to use a metaphor for running, so like you mentioned, I am an ultra marathoner, as are you. You went greater than 31 miles on one day. Is the way that you go 100 miles, or the way that you go, I went 215 over 3 days. The way that you do that is to not run. There are some oddities of physiology and biology who do this stuff. But the vast majority of people go, oh, there's no way I could do it. And I said, if I can do it, you can do this, because I'm not a long distance runner. How you approach it is critical. And so if we immediately start doing something, because something needs to be done, because it's critical, like what is happening in the pandemic now, right? We need to do stuff. And it's like, well, that's like starting to run 100 miles, but not knowing where the finish line is. So you just run because that's something you can do. And you take off. And if you're running in the wrong direction, you just made the run and finish a lot harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the absolute first thing we need to do is stop full board. Just stop and reflect. However, reflecting and ruminating are two very different practices. And so reflection is a positive, nurturing type of thing. Ruminating causes us to go down the cancerous route. So reflection is positive, ruminating is negative. Because ruminating is just digging in and pulling, just wallowing in our emotions again. And what we're doing when we do that is strengthening the synaptic pathways that tie our life to anger, that tie our life to
those limiting emotions. Yeah.
And the more we play these things out, the more they become part of the system, and the less other parts of the world kind of come in. But now anger is a very interesting phenomenon as well, because reflecting on anger can actually be one of the most powerful things we can do. Ruminating on anger can be one of the most destructive. And
Yeah.
there's a British poet named David Whyte, Whyte. And I love David's writing because he captures in beautiful ways things like anger. And most people, I'll ask you the question to see what your answer is. Imagine the most cantankerous, barbed son of a bitch that you know in your world. Just the person walks into the room or doesn't even walk into the room, and you just right. You start to get the, you know, would you like to work really closely with this person on a daily basis?
No, the reason I feel that way about this person or these people is because I have, and I don't like it.
Exactly. And so when we look at angry people, we tend to go, I don't want to be around them. But David White, and I'm going to read you out of this Consolations book, which is brilliant. He says, now follow this. Anger is the deepest form of compassion for another, for the world, for the self, for a life, for the body, for a family, and for all of our ideals. And when you think of an angry person, do you think of compassion?
No, certainly not.
Not even close. So White goes on and he says, all of these are about to be hurt. So the reason why people are angry is because they care. So stripped of physical imprisonment and violent reaction, anger is the purest form of care. And when you think about this, do people get angry about things that they don't care about? If they don't, they're apathetic.
Right.
If they're angry, they are so impassioned with that particular thing, they don't know how to handle their inability to handle the moment. But I would rather work with an entire team of angry people than I would a squadron of apathetic. Apathetic people don't care. They go nowhere. There's no drive. There's no nothing. But if we can rally the passion behind an angry person, it helps them cope in the moment. It helps them cope in general. And we get to capitalize on their passion. Passion is great, but also passions of crime happen all the time. So two-edged sword there too. So leadership is about sitting with somebody and going, bloody hell, this sounds really important to you. Yes, it is. Okay. So important that you're willing to risk everything for this, right? Yes, I am. Okay. Do you hear how that's sounding kind of precarious? Yes. Okay, what I want to do is I want to help you with your passions. I want to decrease the frustration while we get you to be where you need to be, where we need to be, and you don't kill anyone along the way.
Yeah, towards growth rather than destruction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating that, to answer, leadership is, it's everything and nothing. It's positive and negative. It's here, in the past, and in the future. Because we have to have all of these different perspectives. It's something we can talk about and not know what we're talking about fully, but yet we can't not understand.
Yeah.
And when we experience it, we step back and we go, that's not the leadership I was taught. Something is different. So what? What is different? Explore that.
Yeah.
But we know that the human mind is not rational. Absolutely not. We tend to think we're rational thinkers. Science shows we're basically monkeys dressed up at best. However, that doesn't mean we can't be functional. That doesn't mean we can't harness this potential to go to the moon, to get through a global pandemic, to do whatever we want to. And so just because we have all of these nuances and limitations, doesn't mean we can't go to where we would like to. It's just that we need to be really conscious. We need to fully be as conscious as much as we can.
And that's where this reflective piece comes back into the conversation, right? The more that we can be reflective, the more we can be conscious and mindful and then engage with our full, whole selves rather than being disconnected. So,
because if we're living out of a fear-based place, which a lot of leaders do. So leaders define themselves in their position. the leader defines them as their power over other people. Well, as we've heard lots, a leader without followers is a person going for a walk. So the leader's power actually doesn't come with the leader.
No.
It's the followers.
Yeah.
But yet most followers go, they're the leader. I'll wash my hands of what's going on. And that's not leading either.
Well, and some of that, though, is based on the culture of the leader, right? Demanding, dictating.
So it's fascinating that there's these interplays that come in every single angle, every single moment. And it's the reflective piece combined with the theory, with the practical applications, because we can theorize as much as we want. Great. It has to be practical. Practical wisdom is something that the ancient Greeks spoke about 2,500 years ago. It's fine, get smart, but if you can't apply it, it's worth it. So make it practical. Take the theoretical into the real world, and then just simply step back and go, is it really working for us?
Yeah.
Really, honestly. And if it's not, okay, what can be changed? And if leaders are not leading groups as they could or should, it's the followers' power to go, we want something else.
Yeah.
And it's the leader's opportunity to go, wow, I didn't realize that I was doing this because I'm so passionate about the cause. Okay, well, if you are, great. But stand accountable. Yeah. So responsibility and accountability are just as important as vision and tenacity or grit. So all of these come into play, and it's all revolved around that conscious choice, though.
Yeah.
Conscious leadership, and a group called Conscious Leadership Group is one source that really influenced me. Is we have to be mindful all the time what we're doing.
Well, Gary, thank you so very much for exploring what leadership, and I want to give you a last opportunity to share some final words if you have some.
Oh, I absolutely do. And my final words would be that every one of us is a leader, whether we want to admit it or not. And it's standing in our own place with that power that really brings us into conversation, that really brings us into action, that really transforms the world. So the Japanese proverb, I think, is a good way to end it. It's vision without action is a daydream. Action without vision is a nightmare. We have to have both.
Yeah.
But think first before you start. It's like running that 100 miles in the right direction towards your finish line, not someplace else.
Well, thank you so very much once more. Thanks for joining this conversation on what the leadership is. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to check out leadershiptrainer.org for all of your leadership training, programming, and resources.